It's nice to see you. I haven't seen you for a long, long time. And it's wonderful memories that I have. My son's now 25. I think you knew him when he was about 9.
Yeah.
And he just lost his daddy. So it was important for me to have some male role models for Ryan. And when he was starting in the gym, it was no surprise that I asked yourself and obviously another good friend of ours, Ollie, too. So yeah, you're quite right. I'm the former world record holder, world champion. I've been an Olympian 4 different Olympics, and I've got 11 major medals from different championships. So, I mean, World Cups, World Championships, European, Olympics. So it's endless, really. But I guess when you look back, Cam, I've got to look back, and I always say to myself, how lucky was I? Because, I started my life in a series of children's homes for the first 14 years, having been abandoned as a baby. And as time went on, it was quite obvious to me that sport became my saviour. I really enjoyed being able to roll my sleeves up and get stuck in, both whether it was playing hockey, netball, and indeed athletics. So that's where I found myself. And at the age of 11, I can recall the chance meeting that I had with what is now my foster care parents, Margaret Whitbred and John Whitbred. I should give you a little idea how this works, because I was playing a netball match for the league, and it was a very tight game. The match went 11-11, 12-11, 12-all. And I was very loud spoken on the court. I like to motivate my team, being the captain. And of course the whistle went, and this lady said, "Young lady, keep that noise down, otherwise I'll send you off." So I kind of looked and I thought, well, yeah. And I carried on motivating my team. And my voice got louder and louder again. The whistle went, and she said, "Look, I've told you once, so I won't tell you again." She said, "If I have any more loud noises coming from your direction," she said, "you'll be off." So as I turned away, her team captain said, "Fats, be careful, she's very strict." So of course, I then started to watch myself. Fortunately enough, we won the match, so we become the league champions. But at the end of that match, my friend Alma, who lived in the children's homes around the corner to where I was, both Alma and I decided that, the athletic season was starting, and that's what we wanted to do. We walked to the athletic club, Black Shots, which was in Grays, and it was a 5-mile walk from the children's home. And I remember us, when we got to the track, Alma saw the sprinters across the way, and she went off to the sprinters, and I saw this very tall, blonde, good-looking fella over the far side chucking what was looking like a spear. So off I went, Cam, over there. And when I got over there, I picked up what was the javelin, and I got told by him, "Oh, you're not allowed to pick the javelin up." So with that, he asked the shot put coach, Jack Grinney, to look after me until the javelin coach came. So Jack took me across to the stand, and I sat there waiting, and then Jack said, "Oh, here comes the coach." And this mini pulled into the car park. And as this person got out of the car and started walking across the field, I sort of double taped and double looked, and I thought, oh no, it's that same woman who told me off on a netball pool. So yeah, it was that was how our chance meeting happened. And I remember Jack saying to Margaret, he said, "This is," and before he could even mention my name, she said, "Yeah, you're Fatima." She said, "Aren't you?" She said, "Well, let me tell you, young lady, any of that cheat you gave us on the netball court," she said, "you certainly won't be throwing any javelins here." So of course I cut my hands together, and I said, no, honestly, I'll behave myself. And of course 2 or 3 weeks went by, and she would say to me, "Oh, you've got quite a bit of talent. How about you ask Mum and Dad to come up, and we can talk about getting you in a competition program and get you some kit. You're quite good. You'll go far." So I said to her, well, just nodded my head. And after a while, she said to Jack, "Is Fatima got a hearing problem?" So Jack said, "No, why's that?" "Well, she just nods her head every time I ask her to ask Mum and Dad to come up to the track." And of course, with that, Jack said, she lives in the children's homes. That's why. So the following week, Mrs. Whitbred came up and she threw these boots down. She said, I've had a young lady who's retired. She said, these boots are probably 2 sizes too big for you. And she said, stuff them with paper. She said, and here's a javelin. So I thought, wow, nobody's ever given me anything. So that was the first time I've ever experienced some generosity in that way. And I was so eager to get back to the children's home because in the summer season, most of the children that could go home had gone home, and those of us who couldn't, that didn't have a home, we stayed in the institutions, and we had German students that came across that used to help us, while the house parents were on leave. And of course, I sort of managed to get back quickly, and I asked Ingrid to come out into the garden. I said, Ingrid, let me show you how I throw this javelin when I'm up at the track. So I took 2 throws to get it up to the end of the garden, and then I stepped forward and I said, now move out the way, I'm going to give it a really big throw this time. And of course I did, and it went smash through the French windows. So Ingrid's standing there with her head in her hands, and she said, oh no, she said, you're going to be in trouble now with the house parents. And of course I was always in trouble with the house parents because I was quite outspoken, and I always used to like to look after the little kids. So I saw myself as being like mini mum. And so as soon as they came back, I got a month's ban from going to the athletic club, and then I got a message come back through one of Mrs. Whitbred's team captains in one of the sports, and she said, "Oh, Mrs. Whitbred thinks you're bunked off with the javelins and sold them, and you're not bothered about coming back anymore." So I said, I couldn't have this. So I got up at 2:00 one morning in a children's home. And I went downstairs and went to the bureau and I pulled out in my ignorance an airmail envelope. But I said, dear Mrs. Whitbred, sorry I can't get to the track. I smashed the windows. But one day I'd like to be the best javelin thrower in the world. And I stuck it down and I put Mrs. Whitbred St. Chad's School because that's where she was. And I stuck it under my arm. And when I went out the door that morning, off we went and I posted it through the post box. But it took Cam probably about 2 weeks. I thought, no, she's not got it. It's not reached there. But then I heard when I was playing in the garden, I heard the house auntie saying, no, she's been really naughty. She's not allowed out, blah, blah, blah. But Mrs. Whitbred must have been quite convincing and very, dogmatic about it, because in the end I ended up going back to the track within a week. And after that, she asked me would I like to go back to see the family, have tea with them, which I did. And then during that summer season, she also asked me if I wanted to stay for a couple of weeks with the family. Of which, it was fantastic that fate had it. In the end, she asked me, and so did my dad, my adoptive dad. Would I like to be a part of the family? And of course, my brothers, Greg and Kirk. Greg was only 4 and Kirk was 2, so they only ever really knew me as Big Sis.
Yeah.
And the funny thing was, they used to say to my mum, Margaret, "Oh, when's Fatima going back? Are you taking her back to the shop? Why can't we? Why can't she live here?" Yeah, exactly. So that's the story, in as much that the chance meeting that I had in sport, and sport, as I say, was my saviour, and it so happened to be my chosen career. And and Mum and my mum was my coach too. I mean, when I first started, my mum, when I lived with the Whitbreds, she was trying to put me off of doing javelin, and she said there's a lot of hard work involved. So I said to her, yeah, but that's what I like. That's me. That's what I enjoy doing. Sport was my saviour, and I still want to do it. And of course, we worked exceptionally hard, and it took me 12 years before I won my first major title. Right. In 1979, European Junior Champion in Bydgoszcz, Poland, which was the first female or male athlete to ever win a throws event for Britain. And of course, as each year went by, I improved. But in 1986, I became, in the qualifying round, broke the world record. And everybody said, "Oh, you got the wrong day." Nobody's ever broken the world record in the qualifying round and then gone back the next day and won. But you see, for me, it wasn't about that. It was a journey. You know, I was excited about the prospect of going back the next day and trying to improve. My horizons were so high. You know, I wanted to be the first woman to throw over 80 meters. So, I mean, I've broken the world record, which was 76. And I've thrown 77.44, which is, for anybody that is 285 feet, but if you look at a football pitch, which most people can relate to, if you stand at the back end of a football pitch and look down to the penalty area at the other end, that was the distance I threw into the penalty area. So it's quite a long way. And of course, the next day, I went back and I broke the old world record again and lifted the gold medal. So it was a victorious championships for me. I became a European champion, and in the year after that, in 87, became Britain's sole gold medalist in the World Championships in Rome. And that was an amazing year because I was voted World Athlete of the Year, Sports Writer of the Year, Sports Association Writers of the Year, and I got the Sports Personality of the Year award. Back then they had ITV, had a Panasonic award, so I had that. And to top it all off, I got the BBC Sports, MBE given to me by our late Queen. Wow. So that was a very memorable year. For me, it's all about, this is who I am. I love training, the hard work. I'm like sponge to water. You know, I'll suck it all up. And often when I talk to the kids, I mean, one of the most important things is for me, it's not just about the winning, the medals. It's the learning, the experience, the journey, because that's self-growth, and that's so important. Learning who you are as a person, how you deal with things, with you know, the pressures and what's bestowed upon you. I mean, it's one thing when you're competing and you're climbing that ladder, nobody's expecting anything from you. But once you reach the top, the expectations are far greater. You've got your own personal expectation, you've got your friends and family, and you've got the media and the public. And you become like a very big fish in a small pond. So it doesn't matter where you go, even if you go into the supermarket, you're constantly being acknowledged, you know, and, you know, you have to learn to deal with these newfound successes. And realize who you are and how you cope. And it's so important. So it's as far as knowing how to apply yourself. It definitely was, yeah. I mean, I lived in children's homes for 14 years, and I guess, you know, I was not protected. Some would have said you were quite institutionalized, but to be honest, I mean, my young childhood gave me what I call a steeliness that would help me right through my athletic career, even up until today, and a toughness, you know. So I'm quite tough on the outside, but soft the inside. But I do know through my sport, having sort of you know, learned to deal with myself, my own issues, and also how to manage being a top flight international, you know, and deal with the world's media, press. There's only one way of finding that out, really, Cam, is that's when you're pushed in the limelight of it all. And I think you can't be being yourself. You know, at the end of the day, I stand by what I am as a person. You know, I'm quite a principled person. I have my own moral compass in terms of that, you know, my beliefs and my values, and those things are, you know, never compromised. You can always learn about a lot of things, and I'm continually, I mean, I love education because as a child I wasn't able always to absorb education because it's scientifically proven that most youngsters that have emotional instabilities, you know, find that very hard, which I did. But that didn't stop me from doing well at school. It just meant that I wasn't functioning at full capacity, and I realised that. But I've made up for it since, you know. Yeah, no, that's, again, it's a very much part of who I am. I'm someone who loves a challenge. I'll always put my first step forward. I'm not someone who wants to just sit in a comfort zone. I think you learn more about yourself when you actually take on these challenges, and particularly challenges you've never done before. I mean, as you reach senior age as I am, life doesn't stop. I think that's really important to be able to share that with others, for them to realise that just because you become 60 plus doesn't mean to say then you shouldn't be doing jumping off cliffs, bungee rope, or walking along an aeroplane wing. These things that people like to do, why not? At the end of the day, SAS is very much in line with how I trained. I used to backpack run all the time. I'm hardcore when it comes to the gym. When I was snatching 232 and and squatting well over 500. And we're talking about an athlete here that's trained for 12 years in apprenticeship and getting to that level. Not somebody who just walks into a gym. So you've got to have a clear understanding and a knowledge to go with that. And as you know, as an instructor, you can coach some people that mentally are strong and do anything that you chuck at them, and then there'll be others that have that ability, but they've not got the mindset to go with it. And mindset's key. It's 90% of everything, and I feel that my childhood gave me a lot of that, because I was never limited by what I wanted to do. I was a survivor. I had to be. So, I wasn't closing any doors of opportunities. I would walk through and give it everything a go. Yeah, there's a lot to do with, there's a number of things here. It's not just training, is it? It's diet too. Calorie intake. I see so many young women, they go on the treadmills, they think they're burning calories, and then they can go off and have a Mars bar, jam donut, and three or four glasses of wine. But those calories, if they're totting up calories, it doesn't matter if the calories, it is actually what goes in there, and how the body receives it. I think the training it can help your fitness levels, and it can help your cardio system. But as far as balancing a good lifestyle balance with work, play, obviously with what you eat and drink, it's so important in moderation. If you're excessively drinking all the time, sugars is a really bad poison, as we know. I like my jam donuts, so I do eat them, but not excessively. So, but I notice the difference when I don't eat a good diet. I don't feel right. I'm not performing well, and psychologically, that's also the case. It can have an effect on your mental well-being too. And I don't think a lot of people take a lot of notice of that, and they should. There's plenty enough podcasts out there that they could listen to. Tim Spector's one of them. And they could learn a whole lot more and help themselves, because that's what life's about, sharing that emotional intelligence and making sure that you get the optimum amount out of what you've got. Otherwise, you can constantly feel like you're working in failure, in terms of your body's breaking down all the time, you're feeling ill, you're not functioning at full capacity. And why? Because we're not really looking into what it is that we eat and drink and the hours that we stay up. Sleep's so important too. So getting that balance right is key to a happy lifestyle. Again, this is another thing which a lot of these city people, workers do. My son works in the city, so I know what it's like. You have to go out after in the evenings. You've got to be a part of the game. Of course, it always leads to poor food and a lot more drinking and less sleep. And then, of course, these denominators don't help. I think that it's hard when you're starting out in the city, because you have to go along with quite a bit of it. But at the same time, it is important to take responsibility for your health and for your well-being. We've heard so much about mental health issues. We need to look at this in a small way, because if you're training and you want to be the world's best athlete or sports person, you'll go to the gym, you do the physical work. What I call the wholesome is the physical side and the mental side, because the mindset is so important. So you've got to get that right. And if you're carrying problems issues and you're not dealing with them as well, they can hold you back, you know. And then of course what happens then is then you try to put a band-aid over these problems by masking it with food or drink, or, you know, sometimes sex, you know, in excess. Each of us are different, so it's a question of learning about yourself and trying to get that balance right for yourself, and then obviously you perform better. It's really simple. It's not difficult. It's science. But I'm very aware that a lot of people just getting out of bed in the morning can be a problem. You know, obviously, I mean, but if there's two areas here. One is to show. If you're showing, at least then you're able to get that routine. And routine is key, because without a routine, you're not going to be able to perform. You know, you're not going to take up on the exercises, whether it be getting up and taking the dog for a walk, because it's about movement really more than anything. I mean, you don't have to necessarily go to the gym. You can actually do certain things in your own house, you know, but you have to designate an area where you know that place is where you will work, and that other place is where you rest.
Yeah.
And this is so important. If we're working from home, which over the last few years, COVID has driven that everybody into that place where we've been stuck at home. It can be sometimes a toxic place, because we muddle everything up and nothing feels good. And in the end, we just say, oh, well, sod it, you know, let's chuck everything to caution to the wind. But if you set out a place where you know that in the garage, you've got a small area, you can go and train out there. If you haven't got the kit, there's all sorts of manner of things. When I was in the jungle in South Africa just recently, I pick out rocks, different size rocks, and I use those rocks to either do curls or do punches or do overhead claps, you know, or lay down on a tree trunk and do push-ups, you know, sit-ups. There's always ways around it to improvise how you can actually get, even tins of beans, you know, there's ways to get around of it. And you don't need to do it for hours and hours. I mean, if you say 10 minutes, if you start out doing 5 minutes a day, and then you might build up to say 10 minutes. And this is how it improves, you know, and this is by doing it routinely, then you get into the habit, and these habits are formed, and then they're good habits. Them good habits outweigh the bad habits, you know, rather than sit down and have a cup of tea and a bit of cake. Oh, I'll go to the garage and I'll do my little bit of work. Yeah. Then you might go and have a cup of tea, you know, or a sliver of cake. That way you're likely to show. And even if you just get up at 6 o'clock every morning, or say if you're going to work at 6 o'clock, then, you know, you might want to do it in the evening. But the thing is, the whole point is just get up and make that effort to do that routine. Even if you go in there for 5 minutes and do 5 minutes work, you've shown, you've actually stepped out and you've shown, and it starts a routine. Every day you're doing it. And then you think, I might do another 10 of these, and you stay another few more minutes. And in the end, it ends up that you're doing 10, 15, 20 minutes. And every day, and then you feel good about yourself, and you get to understand, actually, it's not as bad as all that. And why make it too difficult for yourself? Then you don't show. We see this time and time again after Christmas, when everybody goes to the gym. The first few months is hell. You can't move around in the gym, but then after a while, it all falls off. Everyone who started out with good intentions with New Year's resolution, it all ends up, pear-shaped. A little bit at a time, and just keep that routine. Just show up and each day. At least you're showing up. And if you get there and you think, I can't do this today, at least go and do a little couple of bits. That's the routine, and that habit is what's the key thing to making the success, to being able to make success, having that routine. I've always felt, you know, as a youngster living in children's homes, I'm very passionate about the young vulnerable kids that live in the care system. There's currently 100,000 children that live in the care system at the moment. I work with Action for Children, and when I say I work with them, I support Action for Children because it's quite close to my heart that these children, they need a voice, they need somebody to speak out for them so they can be seen and heard. It's so key that we've got 800,000 families currently living on the food banks, and that's quite a lot, really. You know, I mean, it can only get worse with the way poverty's going at the moment. And you know, for me, it's quite close to my heart. So yeah, I mean, these challenges that I'm doing, I did the London Marathon Challenge, I did Mont Blanc the year before last, and then at the end of this month, I'm walking 100 miles in 24 hours across the South Downs. Well, the hardest thing for me is well, when I say the hardest thing, I mean it's learning to embrace change as the years have gone by. Because when you're young, you're full of vitality and you're young, nothing, the world's your oyster. And when you've been round the clock a few times, it becomes a little bit harder. You know, but you have to reinvent yourself. I think that's so important, that you have to understand that we change all the time. I mean, not just physically, but mentally too, and our abilities to deal with stuff. And for me, the hardest thing has been, and the most, at the same time, the most enjoyable thing for me is working on who I am and knowing what my abilities are and my limitations too, because nobody ever goes through life without being touched in some way or another by things that you do, or unscathed. And that whole journey for me has been quite cathartic, because I've learned who the real Fatima Whitbred is, and the authentic me. And 20 years ago was different again to what I am now, yeah? And I'm guessing it will be the same as years ago. But all the time, my self-growth is so important, you know, to be able to match this person who I think I am, or I understand myself to be, you know, and knowing my limitations as well, because, you know, we aren't exactly made to do anything and everything. We can, but not at the highest level, but we can scale quite high. We can do it if we put the hours of work in and we practice. Most things are achievable. It's whether or not you want to, and whether you've got the mind application to go with it. And if you give up too easily, then you'll never know. And that's the whole point. You know, the experience is the greatest thing for me. It's the toughest thing, but also the greatest thing. I really enjoy it. And I like to know, you know, if somebody throws a challenge out my way, I'll have to think about it first and how best I would go about doing it. And then I'll try to apply myself. You know, I'll find the ways that you need to train and educate yourself to learning. And that whole experience, you know, mind and body is all embracing for me. And that's where I find my strength. That's where I find myself best. Knowing who I am, what I can achieve and what I can't do, and whether or not I'm able to, you know. As athletes, sportsmen and women, we don't like to lose. I mean, who does? But at the same time, realistically, you're not going to win everything either. And so it's about the experience, taking something away from that experience, even in failure. I mean, and failure, if we want to reframe what failure is, I mean, to me, we're always in failure when we're working, because we're working towards perfectionism. In order to get to that, when you go into a major championships, there are stepping stones along the way, but you start when you get out to the track, or when you're in the gym, or whatever you're doing. You know, you're learning all the time. So you're learning in failure. I mean, that's what failure is. Why have you got to be shy or embarrassed about failing? Because if you have never done it before, there's nothing to be ashamed about. It's just learning, and it's perfecting. I mean, that's what failure is. You're working constantly to perfect something, whether it be, you know, your studies, whether it be at work, whether it be something that you're learning on a computer, whether it be a skill that you're learning in football or javelin throwing, tennis. You're perfecting that skill, and that, hopefully, when it comes to it, when you then have to go and stand in front of a conference and deliver your speech, you're able to do it at the highest level. And then same with your sport, you know, because that's what life is. It's constant pursuing of perfection. Well, I've always written a daily diary. I journal. I love journalism. I mean, I've got behind me, there's a desk. You won't see it, but there's a desk table behind me. I'll show you. And it's full of stuff, see it? So, I mean, I sit there and I work and I do journalism, I do podcasting, I do my artwork. I'm currently writing some children's books. And, you know, these things are all so important to try because, I mean, in our early days, we never think what we're going to be doing in our late 40s, 50s, going on 60s, whatever. But the experience that we gather along the way shapes who we are and how we're going to move forward. And for me, it was always, you know, being able to leave some kind of a legacy behind. And I love journalism. I've always written my diaries in sport. So I look back on them and I know exactly what I've done, when I've done it, and how I got to where I got in terms of the 20 odd years that I was competing in this sport. So it's interesting from competition season. Each season I would have about 20 international events. That's quite a lot of competition, you know, at a high level like that. That's not including your local Essex Championships or, you know, your club events that you get pulled into, and, you know, your warm-up events that you need to do when you're building up to a major championships. And so in each of that phase, you're looking to benchmark what it is, your strengths in your weights, your speed in your running, your plyometric work in your bounding. I mean, I train 3 times a day, 7 days a week. And that's quite horrendous. It was 5:30 in the gym, and the gym wasn't these fancy gyms we have now. I mean, it was a shed, and in the shed, you know, it was just wide enough to be able to do a snatch and a jerk. There's no room for failure. You've got to be precise, and that's what's good about it as well. You have to be precise. So yeah, for me, I mean, 3 times a day, 7 days a week, 8,000 calories a day, building up to. I mean, it's not junk food. You've got to eat sensibly. You've got to have the right sort of protein drinks, 3 eggs, raw eggs, bananas, Complan mixed with milk. You had 2 pints of that day. So that, you know, you're consuming as well as training the right calories. And, you know, in order to reach your optimum weight, your optimum strength, in these different peaks. So you'd be the national peak, which would be the national championships, then into the international scene, and then there'd be the Olympics or the World Championships, European Championships. So you're looking at each phase to build a plateau and be able to springboard to the next one. You can't be throwing here 50 meters and then 50 meters here and then go up to 70 there. No. It's got to be like sort of 55, 65, 75, you know, that natural build up. And in order to get to that level, you have to benchmark everything you do, your strength, your plyometric work, your speed, your endurance work, your cross-country running. So your basic training's done in the winter, and your specific work is done in the spring to the summer. And then you do top-ups. Hundreds all in my loft. Really? Well, you think 20 years, I mean, that's a long time. Yeah. I mean, so it's lovely to look back on though. I mean, Ryan's had a look at them, and yeah, it's so incredible, really, a dossier of chronologue, you know, of events. You know, apart from all the press cuttings my grandfather used to collect in all the papers. Obviously, I mean, Action for Children, I mean, one of the things I was talking about was looking for more foster carers. If you're thinking about that, it's sidestepping out of the career that you're in, and maybe this is an opportunity for you, you know, to give a child love and security of a great home. I mean, every child, as I believe, deserves to have a safe and happy childhood. And so we are looking for more foster carers. And Action for Children's website, I mean, you can go on their website, www.org/Action for Children. So you'll find it on the website, and you can read all about it and try and involve yourself in some way or another. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm trying to give it as much profile as I can and help these young kids by being a voice and being their voice and supporting them and hopefully making changes that will, help their future. And doing these challenges, if you want to go on my Just Giving page, either on Insta or Twitter, you can support that as well. The next challenge I've got is the 100 miles challenge, which is 100 miles in 24 hours right across the South Downs. Anybody that's been there knows it's quite hilly, so it's not an easy challenge, and it's about 15-minute mile pace. So, it's going to be a tough one. But having said that, I mean, I've been doing up to 50 miles now, and 2-3 times a week, at least 3 marathon walks. So I'm in pretty good shape, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm not sure Ryan is. But that's all for our young, vulnerable kids, that live in the care system, and trying to support them through Action for Children.